while the full effects of today's British government cabinet resignations of top Brexiters will become more apparent in the next few days, one thing is already absolutely clear. If any of you were in any doubt a few days ago, there is now absolutely no question. Britain does not have a government that is capable of delivering the clearly expressed will of the British people. No, we have a government that appears to be facing imminent collapse. We have a government led by a Prime Minister who voted to remain and who has never wanted Brexit, who does not believe in the people of Britain and who lacks the will, the backbone and the capability to stand up to her puppet masters and to give the British people what is rightfully ours. The right to make our own laws, to preserve our unique customs and values, and to determine our own destiny without interference from any foreign prince, person, prelate, state or potentate, as our ancient and beautiful national constitution is supposed to guarantee in perpetuity. Since my early teens, I've hated British politics. I've hated the corrupt establishment both in this country and beyond, for that matter, because it's always been completely clear to me that Parliament does not exist for the benefit of the people, and that its only purpose is, incrementally, by degrees and at whatever speed they can get away with, to hijack our democracy and to hand over sovereign power from the British people to corporate and bureaucratic elites. And these elites are voracious. They will never be content. They always want more and more power and control. And what better and more pervasive an instrument of control could there ever be than the European Commission? A group of 28 unelected people who create legislation that accounts for 2/3 of all the laws that are imposed undemocratically and against the will of the people on a population of 500 million. Yes, for those who are watching from outside the EU or who are new to politics and who don't yet understand what kind of a fascist tyranny we live under here in Europe, let me explain a little. The European Parliament is a massive, pointless edifice, purely the tool of an elaborate psychological operation to misdirect the people of Europe into thinking that they're governed democratically by their own elected representatives. Very few members of the European Parliament will ever have the humility to admit it to you, but the reality is that they're completely powerless. The European Parliament has no powers to initiate any legislation. MEPs like to pretend they have power to justify leaving their constituents and travelling thousands of miles across Europe each month and staying in expensive hotels and claiming €250,000 in expenses that hard-working taxpayers pay for every year. But in legislative terms, they achieve absolutely nothing of any significance. They simply go through the motions of debating inconsequential little details, but effectively they just rubber stamp whatever bills are handed to them by the European Commission. So you see, the corporate elites who really run the show and who tell governments what to do have a perfect little system set up for themselves in Europe, a system that they effectively control directly. In the old days, it was annoying for them to have to lobby simultaneously, party whips in political parties in all the 28 different member states of Europe. But nowadays, tyranny is much more efficient. All they need to do, over a couple of thousands of euros worth of dinner in Luxembourg, is to instruct a pliable, inebriated commissioner to sponsor a new bill. And they can pretty much guarantee that the money invested into that one dinner will in a few months' time directly result in lucrative, competition-crippling legislation being forced upon a population of 500 million people throughout Europe. And for any small business owners who probably just lost around 100 hours or so of otherwise productive time implementing GDPR a few weeks ago, who are wondering why on earth something so redundant, expensive, difficult and time-consuming was ever allowed to be imposed on you and to distract you from running your business and feeding your family while big corporations took the new laws in their stride effortlessly with their full-time team of onboard lawyers, you need wonder no more. This is the way it is. Big business controls legislation in Europe, and one thing that you can be absolutely certain of is that they will do everything in their very considerable power to hold onto this control. For that reason, if you put the mission of achieving Brexit into the hands of the elite's faithful servants in Parliament, you can guarantee that while in 2016 Brexit allegedly means Brexit, by the time 2019 arrives, Brexit will actually mean Remain. You see, it is not the ingenuity or motivation of our largely talentless, unimaginative politicians in Westminster that is responsible for creating or implementing the strategy that will be used to keep Britain in the European Union. No, the stakes are so high that the strings are being pulled from the very fulcrum of world power. The shots are clearly being called from amongst those psychotic megalomaniacs that are so obsessed with their ultimate vanity project, their precious so-called New World Order, in which they want to establish political, military, economic, and yes, now even religious control over the entire world. You see, the European Union is just the start of the plan for their totalitarian New World Order that will make George Orwell's 1984 look relatively unambitious if they get their way. If they succeed in holding the EU together, you can be sure they'll have learned their lesson and won't waste any more time or take any more risks with the dangerous notion of democracy, which they, of course, prefer to call populism. So their plan, quite literally a plan for the world domination of a liberal elite that hates the notion of sovereign nation states and distinct national identity, absolutely relies on holding on to Britain. If Britain goes her own way, the EU project falls apart. The whole New World Order project is put in jeopardy, and there'll be a lot of very angry, powerful old men looking for someone to blame. So you see, in spite of these globalist elites being totally outmaneuvered by the Leave campaign into being forced to give the British people a referendum, I've never believed that those who dictate the terms to our political class actually ever genuinely conceded that Britain would finally leave the European Union. We're talking about people who always get their own way, people who are never denied whatever they want and who know how to deal with resistance. And so for a while, I've been waiting to see what they're going to do to derail the Brexit process. And just 3 weeks ago, it all became quite clear. On the 16th of June, it reached my attention that a handful of some of the most influential Remainers in Britain had been called to a secret meeting with some of the most powerful heads of industry from around the world. At this meeting were heads of banks and oil companies, together with heads of state and top officials. And although serving British politicians always ensure they're kept off the official guest list, none other than Remainer-in-Chief Amber Rudd was also in attendance. And the primary objective on the agenda of the meeting that was prioritised at this conference was how to solve the problem of Brexit. But by inviting Mark Carney to the meeting, the governor of the Bank of England, the Bilderberg Group clearly played their hand. And there could be absolutely no doubt that Project Fear 2.0 had just been launched. And so, for the next few months, we can expect an intensification of a fear-based campaign that I believe will massively outclass the half-hearted efforts they made last time round, when they were convinced that since they had Parliament and the media on their side, they couldn't possibly lose. Since the Bilderberg Group invited the editor-in-chief of the very influential Economist newspaper, we'll no doubt be told that initial projections of economic catastrophe were actually very mild compared with what's going to happen if Britain finally leaves the EU. And since they invited the German defence minister, they're probably planning on frightening us all into believing that if Britain doesn't hand over control of its military to the EU army, Russia will take advantage of Europe's weakness and its having distanced itself from the USA, and that will likely soon be faced with World War III. And if there's no evidence for any of this, they'll just make something up and instruct all the sycophantic and dishonest mainstream media press people to duly report concocted fantasies in their compliant publications. Bilderberg have pulled out all the stops this year. They're even employing the services of the Roman Catholic Church, probably in a cynical bid to unite religious people behind their New World Order, having openly invited the Secretary of State for the Vatican to attend this year. The Church of Rome is most likely to tell us how evil and divisive and intolerant and xenophobic we all are if we believe in managing our own labour markets and in the concept of sovereign, independent nation states. So, if indeed the British government has been instructed by their higher-ups either to rapidly self-destruct and to engineer the loss of control of government to a more united pro-Remain Conservative Party, or else to impel another general election and deliberately lose to those naked enemies of democracy, the Labour Party, then what hope is there for Britain, and what should be our response as patriots? Well, as the leader of a direct democracy party whose avowed aim is to oppose the corrupt establishment and ultimately to wrest away power from our political class and to hand this to the people to whom it properly belongs, the electorate of Britain, this question has been uppermost in my mind for a long time. And I'm delighted to be able to tell you today that I really believe that there is a way forward. And it's going to take the help of patriots like those of you watching right now to help us fight for Britain's future, and to consider standing for election yourself if you believe that you have the ability to raise £500 for your deposit and a bit more for campaigning resources, and if you live in a constituency where the Leave side won the 2016 referendum convincingly. You see, 2 weeks ago, I met in London with leaders of other pro-Brexit political parties and also with campaigning organisations. And I'm very pleased to be able to report that it is evident that some of the organisations that I met with are willing to deprioritise immediate party interests in favour of our rallying together for the sake of the country and to unite with us and others to work together in the next general election rather than to continue to divide resources and split the Brexit vote. You see, there is an apparently little-known rule by which the Electoral Commission is required to abide, and that is that if a number of political parties agree to registering a strategic alliance, the Electoral Commission is required to count a seat won for one participating party as a seat for all. And similarly, if none of the parties is able to put forward enough candidates on their own or to single-handedly fund enough deposits to exceed the threshold of 105 parliamentary candidates that I believe are required to stand in order to qualify for a national election broadcast, then if we have, say, 50 independent self-funded candidates and 3 other participating political parties, each standing 20 candidates, the result will be that the Electoral Commission will have to acknowledge that our alliance has met the necessary conditions to broadcast a message on behalf of the alliance nationally. And so the prospect actually becomes much, much more realistic of millions of voters around the country hearing our unified call to the people of Britain to stand up against the treacherous establishment and to take control of their own independent sovereign nation through representatives that are genuinely under their own direct control. Independent members of Parliament working only for their own constituencies and answering to no one else. This is an incredibly exciting new development, but it's one that will only flourish if this and similar messages that we put out are shared throughout the country. Our own party members may wonder what exactly I am asking our party to agree to. In a nutshell, it's this. The strategic alliance that I am recommending that our party signs up to does not in any way go against the values described in our party's constitution. The discussions that I've begun with leaders of other organisations are aimed at ensuring that we establish what is incontrovertible common ground and will be paring away absolutely everything else that is not fundamental for the sake of unity. Those who already know me know that I am an avowed enemy of the establishment and that I am anti-elitist. And the overarching theme of this proposed agreement is absolutely in line with that. Those that I'm speaking with are similarly distrustful of the establishment and agree that party politics has completely failed Britain. In stark contrast with whip-controlled voting within parties that actually answer to donors and vested interests, all signatories of this agreement share the view that every member of Parliament should be directly accountable to his or her electorate only and never to party or any other organisation. And while those within our own party will know that the mechanism that I promote for enforcing and measuring the will of the people within each constituency is that of direct democracy, For the sake of cross-organisational unity, while I'll be continuing to do my best to convince others of the logic of why we should promote direct democracy, I will not be looking to insist that others share my view on this or project the same message within the alliance. So, with the consent of this party, I'm very excited about moving forward with this, and with their permission, I'll be looking to disclose to you the identities of other organisations within the alliance that we are together in the process of building. If you're watching this as a member of the Democrats and Veterans, please vote below on whether you would like me to forge ahead with this frankly groundbreaking initiative. And if you're not a member and have no interest in joining a political party, but you share my distrust of the corrupt establishment and are willing to help us to try to unite all those who believe in freedom and independence and the right of national self-rule, then please share this video as widely as possible and subscribe to this channel so we can let you know what we do next to move towards our shared objectives. Thank you.